something.
Okay. If one poured the first waters in one place and the second waters in a different
No,
place,
that's
and
your time.
you did it again. Same thing I did yesterday. I went to the back one. Okay. Aleph Vav. The peduncle of figs, dried figs, chickpeas, and carobs, these contract tuma and convey tuma and combine. Yossi says even the peduncle of a gourd. The peduncles of pears, crystalline apples, quinces, and sorbs. The peduncle of a gourd, a handbreadth. The peduncle of an eggplant, a handbreadth. Reb Elazar, the son of Reb Zadok, says two handbreadths, these contract tuma and convey tuma, but do not combine. And all other peduncles do not contract tuma and do not convey tuma. Olives that one preserved with their leaves are tahor because you only soak them for their appearance. The hairs of cucumbers and its blossom are tahor. Reb Yehuda says as long as the cucumber is by a merchant, it is tameh. All pits contract tuma and convey tuma, but do not combine. And the pit of a moist date, even though it protrudes, combines, but the pit of a dry date does not combine. Therefore, the membrane of a dry date combines, but the membrane of a moist date does not combine. The pit of which a portion protrudes, that which is opposite the food combines. A bone on which there is meat, that which is opposite the food combines. And if meat was on one side of the bone, Rabbi Ishmael says we view it as if the meat surrounds the bone in a ring. But the Gekam say what is opposite the food combines, that like wild rosemary, hyssop, and savory. Okay.
Okay. All right, more examples. Rimon va'avatiach shenimok miktaso. So let's say you've got some kind of fruit. They've given the examples here of a pomegranate or a melon that have started to rot. So the part that's rotted is inedible. It's not considered food. Okay. Eno
Okay.
eno mitzaref. The rotted part does not join with the rest. So if there's less than a kibetza of food of edible food that you would actually eat, then it cannot become tame, even though there's a lot of other food that previously was okay. So it's not mitzaref. Shalem mikan umikan. What happens if let's say you've got a melon that's whole on one side, whole on the other side, and the middle has rotted. The nimuk mina emta. So eino mitzaref. So the two good parts don't join with each other because the rotted part in the middle separates them. A pitma shel rimon. So now, which part of the rimon is that? It's Kat explains this is the protrusion that comes at the end, so like that crown on the rimon, I guess. Um, right. So that little crown over there is mitzarefes. That is part of the shomer of the fruit. It's part of the klipa, and therefore it joins to make your minimum shear. Hanetz shelo eno mitzaref, but those fibers that come out of it, that's not considered part of the fruit. You can't hold by it. It doesn't protect. It's not counted. Rabbi Elazar Omer afham masreik tahor. He says also that comb is tahor. So he's disagreeing with the Tanakama who said I think it's the same thing that was called the pitma before.
Uh,
Um, so the Hanetz yesh kamin kos. So that crown over there, he's saying, is also not part of the rimon. It's decorative. It doesn't protect anything, and it's just and it's not. It doesn't. It's completely tahor.
the pomegranate, the pomegranate sitting they all have like little compartments, they have white around it.
Yes.
So is that considered shomer? Is that
So the pith inside is a shomer. I would be pretty sure. Yeah.
right?
It keeps the stuff inside fresh.
Right. Okay.
The shell around it, I can't imagine that as you go closer into the fruit that it's going to be
Right.
more lenient. The skin for sure is mitzvah. It's a shomer. Okay. Kol haklipin mitamos umitamos umitztarfos. All of the shells. That's exactly what we just said. So all skins of fruits, whether it's oranges, pomegranates, apples, however thick or thin it is, it's protecting the inner fruit, and therefore, as a shomer, it is considered exactly as if it's the part of the fruit itself. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shalosh klipin bebatzal. However, with an onion, you've got three layers of klipa. Apnimis, okay, bein shlema bein kedura mitzarefes, and so the inner part of the onion. So that's really we're talking about the edible flesh. Okay, so that inside that inner part is whether it's whole or whether it's got holes in it, whole or got holes. Now, whether it's whole or broken, it all combines with the fruit. It's all considered edible. Emtzais, there's a middle layer of the onion where it's sort of partially food and partially dried out and brown. Okay, shleima mitzarefes, a kedura eina mitzarefes. If it is whole, then it joins with the fruit. But if it's punctured or if it's or torn, what's it? Then it is no longer it's no longer protecting the onion, and it's no so in other words, it's no longer called a shomer, and therefore it cannot join. Okay, V'achitzona ben kach o ben kach tahora, and the dried outer leaves are completely tahor, whether or not they're whole, because they're not edible, and they don't protect anything in particular. Okay. Hey, mechatech lebashel. So if somebody takes a big piece of meat and he cuts it up into pieces to stick it in the pot. Afal pisha lo merek, even though he did not complete the cut. So he wasn't particular about finishing the cut and separating the pieces into separate chunks, but it's clear that he wants them to be separate chunks in the soup. Okay? Eino chibor. So now this is no longer considered a chibor for a connection for tuma. So if a tame person touches the one piece of meat, it becomes tame, not the one that it's attached to, because it's clear that they're going to separate in the pot. Okay, they're going to, and they're meant to be separated. Okay, lichbosh, if however he did it for pickling, or for lishlok is to stew, hanicho ala shulchan, or haniach ala shulchan, or to put it onto the table. Yeah, sometimes you'll cut up something and leave it not quite separated, so that it stays together for presentation, and the guests will separate it out themselves. Now then it's still a chibur, because there is a certain value that he's placing in keeping the things attached. So it's easier to work with because it looks nice, and only when the guests want the pieces, then they'll start taking them apart. Excuse me. Hischil lefarek, as soon as they start to separate these things out, ochel shehischil bo eino chibor. Once it starts to break up, and hang on, Fred legamre chatach. Right, so once people start taking off the pieces, then even the pieces that are still attached are no longer considered attached, because now it's reached the end of its useful life of attachment. Ha'egozim, okay, nuts she'amanan, which means that they're tied together by their stems with a string. So he's basically strung them all together. Okay, v'habetzalim shechamaran, and similarly with onions that are strung together. Harei zeh chibur. Harei elu chibur. All of these are considered attached because this is how they are. This is how they're meant to be for a while. Okay, so if one becomes tameh, it's going to transmit the tumah all through the whole unit. Okay, and once he starts breaking the nuts off the string, or the onions off the string, he's again shown his intention now that we've reached the end of the time when we need them to be strung together, and now they're judged as separate units again. Now, nuts, and I think when I'm talking about egozim, we're talking about like hazelnuts, and shkedim are almonds. They're a chibur to what? They're a chibur to their shells. Okay, this is talking about the clipper of the shafilu niftza'ah. Even if they are cracked, even if their shells are cracked, then there's still a chibur between the nut and the shell. Until they're actually crushed, until they're crushed to the point where they're no longer protecting the nut. Once they've been crushed and they're no longer protected, then they are completely insusceptible to tumor. Nobody eats the shell, and the nut, only the nut inside is susceptible. Okay.
Okay. You died.
Yeah.
If one poured
By
the
the way,
first
you sound like you've got a bit of a cold there.
yeah, I'm really, really out of it.
Hmm.
If one poured the first water in one place and the second water is in a different place, and a loaf of truma fell, and it fell into the first water, it is tame. But if it fell into the second waters, it is tahor. If he poured the first and second waters in one place, and the loaf of truma fell in, it's tame. If one poured the first waters, and a splinter of gravel was found on his hands are tame, because the last waters purify only the waters that were on the hand. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says regarding any organism that originates in the water, it's tahor. Hands become tamei and become tahor only up to the joint. How so? If one pound of first board is until the I'm sorry, if one poured the first board is until the joint and the second one is beyond the joint and they return to the hand is tahor. If one pounds the first and the second one is beyond the joint and they return to the hand is tamei. If one poured the first waters on one hand and he changed his mind and poured the second waters on both hands, his hands are tamei. If one poured the first waters over both hands and he changed his mind and poured the second waters over one hand, his hand is tahor. And if one poured water over one hand and he rubbed it on the other, it is tamei. But if he rubbed it on his head or a wall, it's tahor. 4 or 5 people can wash their hands side by side or one above the other, provided that they loosen their hands so that the water can go between them. Dalit, if it is uncertain whether work was done with the water or work was not done with it, or it was uncertain whether the water has the requisite amount or does not have the requisite amount, or it is uncertain whether the water is tame or tahor, the uncertainties are ruled tahor. But they said an uncertainty pertaining to hands, whether they regard to becoming tame or conveying tuma or to becoming tahor or ruled to tahor. The Yossi says a case of uncertainty whether they become tahor is ruled tame. How so? A person's hands were tahor, and before him were 2 tame loaves, and it is uncertain whether he touched them or he did not touch them, or his hands were tame, and before him were 2 loaves, 2 tahor loaves, and it is uncertain whether he touched them or he did not touch them. Or one of his hands was tame, and the other was tahor, and before him were 2 loaves, the tahor loaves, and he touched one of them, but is uncertain whether he touched with the tame hands or the tahor hand. Or his hands were tahor before him with 2 loaves, one of which was tame and the other tahor, and he touched one of them, but it is uncertain whether he touched the tame one or he touched the tahor one. But one of the hands was tame and the other was tahor, and before him were 2 loaves, one of which was tame, the other tahor, and he touched both of them, but it is uncertain whether the tame hand touched the tame loaf, and the tahor hand touched the tahor loaf. When the tahor hand untouched the tame loaf, and the tame hand touched the tahor loaf, the hands remained as they were, and the loaves remained as they were.
Okay.
Okay. Oof.
Machshirin, Dalit, Dalit.
Regarding a barrel in which a leak dripped, the Beis Shammai says he must break the barrel, but Beis Hillel says he may pour out the water. But they agree that he may stretch out his hand and take the produce from within the barrel, and the produce is tahor. Regarding a bowl into which a leak of the water that splashes and overflows is not included in the law of water is placed. And if he took it in order to spill out, Beis Shammai says it is included in the law of water is placed, but Beis Hillel says it is not included in the law of water is placed. If he placed the bowl so that the leak would drip into it, the water that splashes and that overflows, Beit Shammai says it is included in the law of water is placed, but Beis Hillel says it is not included in the law of place. If he took it in the order to spill it out, both agree that the water is included in the law of water is placed. Regarding one who immerses utensils or launches his garments in a cave, the water that comes up on his hands is included in the law of water is placed. But as for the water that comes up on his feet, it is not included in the law of water is placed. If Elazar says it is impossible for him to descend unless his feet become wet, then even the water that comes up on his feet is included in the law of water is placed. Regarding a basket that is filled with turmicin and one places it in a mikvah, if one stretches out his hand to take turmicin from within the basket and yet they are tahor, if you remove the turmicin from the water, those that touch the basket are tamei, but as for the rest of the turmicin, they are tahor. Regarding a radish in a cave, a needle may rinse it, and yet it is tahor, And if she lifts it even a little bit from the water, it's tummy.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
olive. There are 13 things concerning the carcass of a kosher bird, but it needs intention. It does not need preparation. It contains the truma of foods in the volume of an egg. The volume of an olive contains truma in the esophagus. Someone who eats it needs the setting of the sun. One is liable on account for entering the temple. Truma is burned on its account. Someone who eats a limb severed from while it was alive receives 40 lashes, and its slaughtering and malika under its draper are to be tahor. These are the words of Rameya. Rebuta says they did not render tahor. And Yossi says the slaughtering rendered the tahor, but not its malika. The feathers and the down acquire tuma and convey tuma, but they do not combine. Rabbi Yishmael says the feathers combine, the beak and the claws acquire tuma and convey tuma and combine. Rabbi Yossi says even the tips of the wings and the tip of the tail combine, since they are left in unfastened, fattened birds. The carcass of the non-kosher bird needs attention and preparation. It conveys the truma of foods in the volume of an egg, half of it often to qualify the person. It does not have the law of the volume of an olive for the esophagus, and someone who eats it does not need the setting of the sun. One is not liable on its account for entering the temple, but truma is burned on its account, and someone who eats a limb severed from it while it's alive does not receive 40 lashes, and its slaughter is not rendered a tahor. The large feathers and the small feathers acquire tuma, and convey tuma and combine. The beak and the claws acquire tuma, and convey tuma and combine.
Okay. By the way, interesting to see this over here in Taurus when we're talking about birds, because it's very relevant to our subject of Uktzin that we're
Uh,
following, like the shomer and the yad. What's if it's considered a shomer, then it's even on flesh as well. But if it's a shomer is also part of the it combines to make the minimum volume. Okay, Meila.
the shtei lechem are subject to me'ilah from when they are consecrated. Once they crust in the oven, they become prepared to be disqualified through contact with the Tel Yom, or through contact with the Methuselah Kapurim. And they become fit to slaughter the shlamim, offering on account of them. And once the blood of the lambs is sprinkled upon the altar, one is liable on account of the shtei lechem. For in pigul noser tame, or they are no longer subject to me'ilah. The lechem upon is subject to me'ilah from which it is consecrated. Once it crusts in the oven, it becomes prepared to be disqualified through contact with the tel yom, through contact with the mekusa kapurim, and becomes fit to be arranged upon the shulchan. Once the boons of the vana are offered upon the altar, one is liable on account of the lechem upon for pigul noser atome, and the lechem upon is no longer subject to me'ilah. The mincha offerings are subject to me'ilah from when they are consecrated. Once they are consecrated in a sacred vessel, they become prepared to be qualified through contact with the Tel Yom, through contact with the Mekusa Kapurim, or through remaining past their time. Once the chametz is offered upon the altar, one is liable on account of the mincha for the pickle noser tome, and the remnants are not subject to me'ilah, but the kumet is subject to me'ilah until it goes out to the place of ashes.
Okay.
Okay.
Rakama.
Okay, good base. If he gave the money to the Kohen of the watch, Kohen of the watch, and he died, the heirs do not exact it from them. As it is said, the man who gives to the Kohen, he shall be his. If he gives money to the Yehorav and the guilt offering to Yadeya, he has fulfilled his obligation. If he gives the guilt offering to Yehorav and the money to Yadeya, the guilt offering exists. The money of Yadeya shall offer it. If not, he must bring another guilt offering for one who brings what he stole before he brings his guilt offering, has fulfilled his obligation, but one who brings the guilt offerings before he brings what he has stolen has not fulfilled his obligation. If he gave the principal that I give the fifth does not prevent atonement. If one stole something and gave it to his children to eat and he left it to them, or he exempt from paying, or they are exempt from paying, but if there was something which can they lien on it, they have a lien on it, they are obligated to pay. We may not change money from the customs collector box or from the tax collector's purse. Normally, we accept charity from them, but one may, however, accept from his house or from the street. If the custom offer collectors took his donkey and gave him another donkey, or the robbers stole his clothing and gave him other clothing, they are his since the owner despairs of them. If one rescues from a liver, from a troop, or from robbers, or if the owners have despaired of them, they are his. Likewise, the Torah bees, if the owners have despaired of them, they are his. But Broken says a woman or a minor is believed believed to say, this swarm came out of here, and one may go to another field and save his swarm. If he inflicted damage, he must pay for what he damaged. But if he did not cut off the branch, man cut off this branch with the intention of making his restitution. If Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Elkanah ben Broker, says he may even cut it off and make restitution.
Okay.
Mm.
And
We
Erevin.
have Gimel. We may place the dressing in the temple, but not in the provinces. For the first time, it is prohibited here and there. We may tie a string in the temple, but not in the provinces. If for the first time it is prohibited here and there. We may cut off a wart in the temple, but not in the provinces. If with an instrument it is prohibited here and there. A Kohen who injured his finger may wrap reed grass over in the temple, but not in the provinces. If to force out blood, he is prohibited here and there. We may spread salt on the ramp so they should not slip, but we may draw water from the Excel's well and from the great well, where the windlass on the Sabbath, and from the flowing well on Yom Tov. If a sheretz was found in the temple, a Kohen may remove it with his sash, so as not to prolong the presence of the tomb of contamination. These are the words of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Rabbi Yehuda says, with a wooden ring tongue, so as not to increase the contamination. Where to remove it? From the temple, the antechamber, between the antechamber and the altar. These are the words of Rabbi Shimon ben Anas. Rabbi Akiva says the area for which one occurs for an intentional transgression, the synonym for unintentional, and there we must remove it. For all our acts areas, we can cover it with a pot. Rabbi Shimon says, whatever the sages have granted a dispensation, they have given you what is yours. They have not permitted except that which is a rabbinical decree. Okay.
Adrian Allah Maseches Erevin. And tomorrow's Psachim.
Pesachim tomorrow? Okay.
Tomorrow's Psachim, yep.